chapter of Invisible Scarlet O'Neil versus the King of Slums. Chapter 8. Condemned property. At 8 o'clock the next morning, there were faint stirrings in the new apartment of Joseph and Matilda Updike. The stirrings consisted mainly of Joe being shaken by the shoulder by Matilda, tired and irritable after a sleepless night in the drafty bedroom. Mrs. Updike couldn't bear to see her husband sound asleep while she was up and around. Joe, get up, she insisted, prodding and poking him in the ribs. Oh, Joe mumbled sleepily, and then he sat up with a groan. Oh, what a night. My back is broken. What a bed, he moaned. The bed was a wobbly iron contraption and an old, bulgy web spring and a thin, lumpy mattress. Joe's bones creaked with the spring when he tried to get up and out of the worn old bed. He got a splinter in his foot from the cold, rugless floor, and he glared at his wife. Matilda clasped her hands dramatically and paced the room, a woebegone expression on her lined and sagging face. This apartment is too horrible. I simply won't live here. What will my friends say? Her voice rose to a wail. She whipped out a handkerchief, and after jerking up the ragged window shade, sat down on a rickety wooden chair. Oh, boo-hoo. And we had such a lovely apartment. I can't stand it. I simply can't stand it another minute. And I won't, she cried. Her husband showed scant sympathy. He felt as miserable as she did and reminded her, "It's all your fault. You wanted to move." Fresh as a daisy, Scarlet O'Neil, who was at the bottom of the Updike's trouble, tumbled out of bed an hour later and made herself invisible to carry on her mission. I'm going to investigate the investigators and see how they like their new homes, she giggled. She peeked in the Petty apartment just in time to hear the outraged and storming committeeman shout, "This place is a wreck. Wait till I see Cecil strike. I'll tell him. This is an outrage." Mrs. Petty agreed with him wholeheartedly as she pulled herself up from a chair with a broken spring and said, "How can anyone live in such surroundings?" Scarlet thought the committee report said the buildings were structurally sound. And she smiled to herself as Mr. Petty indignantly stalked through the shoddy living room, his face crimson with anger. "I'm going to take a bath and get down to Strike's office," he announced as he headed for the bathroom. "Oh, no, you're not, dear," his wife said sweetly. She opened the bathroom door with a dramatic, sweeping gesture and said, "Look, no bathtub. What are you going to do now?" That was the last straw for Mr. Petty. He stared into the room with eyes popping and his fists clenched, mumbling, "What? No bathtub? Not even a shower?" Scarlet ducked out of the apartment and went up a flight to see how the Robinlaws were faring in their rundown quarters. Uh-oh, the Robinlaws are having a battle, Scarlet murmured as she stopped for a moment outside their door and listened. Mrs. Robinlaw, a crabbed look on her face, was shaking her finger under her husband's nose and saying shrilly, Elmer Robinlaw, if you think I'm going to live in this nightmare of a place called an apartment, you're mistaken. Mr. Robinlaw's irritation matched hers. He, too, had spent a sleepless night trying to find a spot in the rickety old bed. You moved out of your nice, comfortable apartment. I didn't, he shouted back at her. Now don't bother me. I've got to do my exercises. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. He began to do bending exercises, thumping and bumping. While his wife flounced out of the room, saying, "Bah!" Elmer Robinlaw, partly to work off his anger over being forced to live in the cheaply furnished rooms, threw himself vigorously into his exercises. He jumped up and down, and his nearly 300 pounds fairly rocked the room. There was a cracking sound from the plaster walls, and suddenly a big piece of plaster fell on his head. Scarlet O'Neil, who had been an interested spectator to the performance, drew back just in time to avoid being hit, too. She thought Mr. Robinlaw was going to fall over, but instead he stayed on his feet and staggered toward the nearest chair. His wife entered the room at that moment and exclaimed, "Elmer Robinlaw, have you actually been drinking before breakfast?" Scarlet held her hand over her mouth to keep from tittering out loud, and left the Robinlaws to their battling. She passed the Pettifetties' apartment and went down to the one below theirs to see how the Updikes were getting along. Meanwhile, Mr. Pettifetty, who had not gone to the office without his daily bath for years, had found a big washtub and lugged it into the dilapidated kitchen. "I've got to take a bath some way," he grumbled. He filled the leaky old tub with cold water and added a pan of hot water, which he had heated on the stove. He wedged himself into the tub, grabbing onto a curtain as he lost his balance, and then the soap slipped out of reach. The tub tipped as he tried to grab the soap, and the cracked kitchen floor was splashed. "This is the last straw," Mr. Pettifetty growled. One floor below, Scarlet found the Updikes attempting to eat their breakfast of eggs, toast, and coffee. They were eating in grouchy silence until something splashed into Mr. Updike's freshly poured cup of coffee. They both looked up toward the ceiling, and for a moment, they thought it was raining indoors. Water was falling, drip, 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 through the ceiling plaster and pouring into the light fixture. "Hey, what's going on up there?" Updike shouted. Mr. Pettifetty's voice shouted in response, "Shut up, Updike. I'm merely trying to take a bath up here." "A bath?" Updike shouted back in disgust. The bath water was dripping down the back of his neck and soaking the kitchen furniture. Mrs. Updike was so indignant that she could only splutter. Plaster had fallen on Robinlaw, the washtub had fallen over with Pettifetty, and water had dripped into Updike's breakfast. Scarlet knew that her plan had been successful. The three committeemen were boiling mad and were going after Cecil Strike with fire in their eyes. "Wait till I lay my hands on that bird, Strike," Robinlaw growled as he clenched his big fist and started rolling up his sleeve. "He told us all those apartments were in good shape. Ha!" Mr. Updike rasped. He had never in his life been so angry. Mr. Pettifetty strode along, saying nothing.
but his face was screwed up in anger. The three, marching abreast, entered Strike's real estate office, where they found the worried real estate man.
Aha, Strike!
They cried. Robin-Law hit him in the chin. Updike struck him in the jaw, and short Mr. Petty-Fetty got behind him and administered a swift kick, while Strike grunted.
No, gentlemen, I beg you. Oh, ow!
They left him in a corner, holding his head and seeing stars.
And that's just the beginning. We'll send you up for years for false representation.
Updike threatened.
We'll throw the book at him.
Petty-Fetty added as he thought again of the leaky old wash tub. Scarlet O'Neil hurried to the office of the architect for the housing project. She found him still feeling glum, and she was glad she was bringing tidings to cheer him.
Good morning, Charlie. I have good news for you.
She called gaily as she entered his office. Before she could explain, the telephone rang.
Did you say you had some good news to tell me, Scarlet? He asked hopefully. Yes, but first answer your phone,
Scarlet suggested. She knew by the expression on Charlie's face that he was hearing something he wanted to hear over the wire. The mayor was saying,
Hello, Du, this is the mayor. You can go ahead with your housing project plans. The committee just informed me that they will condemn Strike's property and you can proceed.
Great, Charlie Du shouted. He put the telephone down and whirled around. He picked up Scarlet and waltzed around the room with her, saying jubilantly,
Scarlet, did you hear that? The committee is condemning all of Strike's property. That was the good news I was intending to tell you myself.
She laughed. Charlie sat down and regarded Scarlet thoughtfully.
I don't know how you did it, but I do know you were responsible,
he said.
You're wonderful.
Scarlet replied,
I hope that someday we'll see every city in America cleaning up its slum districts.
Invisible Scarlet O'Neil had won another fight for those in need. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for watching.